Welcome to Backyard Oasis, a podcast designed by and for older adults living in the beautiful Pioneer Valley of Western Massachusetts and produced in the tech studios at Greenfield Community College in Greenfield, Massachusetts. Backyard Oasis reaches out to older adults who seek knowledge to help them live more thoughtfully, healthily, and happily, who hope to inspire others with their ideas, and who serve their communities in the interest of the greater good. We hope you join us frequently in our pleasant Backyard Oasis for wide-ranging conversations with a diversity of people who are growing older and want to talk about it.
Hi, I'm Denise Marianne Schwartz, your host. Okay, humans, let's face it, we are living in an aging world. Aging not just in our communities, but everywhere, all across the globe. Here's some data to ponder, taken from a report on aging supported by the National Institute on Aging, the National Institutes of Health, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the U.S. Department of State. Number one, for the first time in history, and probably for the rest of human history, people aged 65 and over will outnumber children under the age of 5. Number two, in 2006, almost 500 million people worldwide were 65 years of age and older. Number three, by 2030, that's 5 years from now, that total of older adults in the world is projected to increase to 1 billion. 1 billion people over the age of 65. Now, that means that 1 in every 8 of the Earth's inhabitants will be older adults. 1 in every 8. Number 4, the number of the oldest old is rising. People aged 85 and over are now the fastest growing portion of many national populations. That's a lot to think about, isn't it? Well, the question today is, how will we humans who are living today adjust to our rapidly aging world, the problems it poses, and the opportunities it offers? My guest today is Jason Molony. You recently heard him talk with me in an episode about age-friendly and dementia-friendly communities. Jason has said, and I'm quoting here, "You can't look at the data around global and local aging without thinking, OMG, oh my gosh. It's like climate change in a way. It's happening. It's huge. It will change everything, and we're not prepared." So today, with Jason's help, we're going to hear more about how we can prepare to live more healthily and happily in our aging world, how we can think critically about it, plan for it, and importantly, take action. Now, let me quickly remind you about Jason. He is the Age and Dementia-Friendly Program Director at LifePath, a nonprofit organization serving older people, people with disabilities, and caregivers in Western and Central Massachusetts. There, he leads efforts to build more inclusive, supportive communities for older adults, caregivers, and people living with dementia. For the last 13 years, he's focused on systems-level change and community-based solutions to improve aging in the healthcare, academic research, and nonprofit sectors. Previously, he directed the SHARE Network at the University of Chicago, and he led the Massachusetts AI and Technology Center for Connected Care and Aging at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Hello again, Jason.
Hello again, Denise.
Well, since I've been quoting you already, and I'm telling you right now, I'm going to do it a lot through our episode today, let's start with something that you just recently told me. You said, "The future holds more older adults than ever before, and that's not a problem. It's a reality. The question is whether we'll adjust, whether we'll honor those lives or try to pretend they're invisible." Now, those last two sentences really jumped out at me, Jason, and 4 words in particular did. They are adjust, honor, as in honoring those lives of older adults, pretend, and invisible, as you used them in your phrase, or are we going to pretend that they're invisible? So I'd like us to keep those things in mind as we talk today, and maybe we can talk a little more about them. But I know we have a wide-ranging conversation ahead of us, so let's keep those things, especially like this thing about honor the older adult lives, those lives of the people that we have here right now. Maybe we should talk more about that, or in a third episode. Up to you. Okay, so tell me, how are we going to adjust our futures in our aging world?
Great question. So I certainly think that there's a policy component to this, and I can tell you, we used the metaphor of climate change, which I want to stress has its limitations because climate change is a undoubtedly catastrophic and deleterious process. That does not need to be the case at all with our changing aging demographics. That's really what's up to us, up to our leaders. And I will tell you that, getting back to the policy perspective, economists and industrial policymakers, really on both sides of the aisle, are and globally are looking at ways that they can adapt to the changing aging demographics in some really interesting ways. Like, for example, you're starting to hear about incentives for people to have more children coming up, right? When we used to think that overpopulation would be just this catastrophic problem. And now, in fact, you're starting to hear a lot of policymakers think that the opposite is actually true because of the fact that there may not be enough younger people to economically support the needs of older adults in the future.
So in terms of policy, we're really looking at economies.
That's a macro level policy answer.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I really want to talk about that because I'm one of those people who thinks that overpopulation is a big problem. So we can go on to some more policy things that you want to talk about.
Well, then you'll be glad to know that, populations are declining as fertility rates plummet, but it creates new problems, right? But let's just talk about sort of on a local level about policy, if you don't mind. We can go in a little deeper. So one thing that's happened in Massachusetts recently is the provision of legislation to allow for accessory dwelling units. These are smaller homes on the same property as a larger home, might be that 800 square foot building where a caregiver could move in, an older parent could move in. So now communities all across the state of Massachusetts must allow their folks to be able to build these ADUs by right.
Now, the state has said that we can do that. Do towns have to vote on that?
No. In fact, that's what that by right means. Statewide, towns cannot prohibit their residents from building ADUs, and they can't also put in a series of restrictive zoning provisions that will, in essence, prevent people from being able to build ADUs. However, in a rural community like ours, there are practical issues. There's septic, there's utilities that if you add another unit to your house can, also need to be addressed. So it's not perfect, but that's one example of a policy change that's happened recently.
And that's a good one, yeah.
Another one that I was interested to learn more about as I moved out here, because I think Massachusetts really leads the way, is with senior tax work-off programs. These happen at the town level, and it allows an older person to work for the town and take the money that they're earning and use it to essentially pay off their property tax bill.
Right.
These are spreading quite quickly as well. And
I think there are 3 communities in Franklin County that already have the tax write-off.
More than that.
Or work-off. I'm sorry. Tax work-off. Oh, there are more than that.
Oh, yeah.
I know we're working on it in our town.
It's one of these things that towns that are kind of quickly getting on board with.
And it's a nice idea. I mean, maybe you want to explain it a little bit more, but not only do you see a reduction in your taxes, but you're also really involved with your community and how it's working, because you're going to probably be right there in the town hall or in the senior center. There are a lot of ways that you can help the town and use the skills that you've developed over a lifetime, which for a lot of older adults, they don't get to do.
Precisely. Yes, it's very helpful for civic engagement. For us in the age and dementia-friendly world, it's almost like a win-win, because we've got people involved in the civic level, and there's an economic benefit to them personally.
For the person.
Yeah.
Anything else in terms of policy? I mean, I'm sure there are many things.
Well, one thing I'm really excited about is that we were able to get some additional funding, about $110,000 or $10,000 per village organization locally, and there's 10 of them that are going to be supported this way. Big shout out to Joe Comerford for help bringing that together.
Right.
And I know I actually spoke to her yesterday down in Boston, and she wants to see that support for financial support for the villages is written in as a line item rather than this sort of one-off provision of additional funding. So seeing budgetary support for grassroots-oriented, neighbor-to-neighbor type programming like the villages is huge.
Now, is this money going to be used to help communities start village programs, or is it for all those that are already in existence?
It's for those that are already in existence, some that are quite new, like Greenfield Neighbors, for example. However, and we can talk about this a little bit more later,
sure.
We do, through LifePath, the Asian Dementia Friendly Initiative, and the kind of regional effort, we do offer funding that can be helped to get a new village off the ground.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Okay, that's good. You like to talk about the villages, and you've done a lot of work
I have.
With the villages. Tell us a little bit why they're so important to you.
Oh gosh, to me personally,
we only have 30 minutes here, so
I know you like a good personal story.
I do.
What got me into aging in the first place was that I went back to grad school. I was not sure. I knew I wanted to be in the helping capacity, but I didn't know exactly what. And I started looking at Bureau and Labor Statistics. It's not the most romantic.
Sounds really exciting.
And I knew there was a huge opportunity to make change, doing this work. And then I had back pain at the time, and I had a meeting. I had an appointment with my acupuncturist, and as she's poking me, she says, we were talking about aging, and she said, well, we're starting this. We're thinking about starting a village here in our neighborhood. Do you know what that is? No. Well, they took that to, from that conversation, because they knew I was interested in it and I was willing to put some work in, they put me right on the steering committee, which became the founding board for, shout out Chicago Hyde Park Village, which is one of the quite well-established villages in Chicago. They're doing fantastic work. And then I took that, and then I got a job at another village where I worked for a couple of years. And just to remind listeners of what a village is, this is a grassroots, neighbor-to-neighbor, typically, especially in this region, volunteer-led organization. They provide a lot of, in our case, transportation, volunteer transportation. They a lot provide help with light home chores, things like that. Sometimes medical advocacy, somebody who can accompany you to a doctor's office, and then often a lot of social activities and events as well. So, but the beauty of it is that the grassroots organizations are formed by older adults for older adults in their town. So it's a really bottom up approach that sets priorities for what is needed there.
And it's not strangers coming in to help, which I know we did a survey. I know LifePath did a survey. And one of the things that folks responded to was a question about living in your home for a long time. And they said, well, I would really like to do this. I mean, significant number of people said this, but we're not certain that we can find people we can trust who can help us with home repairs or the things that we need. And that issue of trust was really high. Now, I'm not saying that every person that you might know would be trustworthy, but hopefully they will. But it is lessened a bit, that fear that this person, I don't know this person, are they going to be okay with me? That is lessened a little bit if that person is someone from your town, your community, maybe your neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
Right. And who's been vetted by this organization.
Yes.
I mean, when I worked in a village, and everyone I'm familiar with, I'm never going to send a stranger we don't know to go help somebody out, even just to give them a ride or move the plants in from the, from the porch to the...
They'll do that?
I've done it myself personally as a village volunteer.
Oh, well, listen, we need our gutters cleaned, and I don't think my husband wants to get on that big ladder again. So are you doing anything a little bit later today? Wait. You're not allowed to say no, are you?
Yeah, I am allowed to say no.
Come on. Well, anyway, that's the kind of stuff that we need help with.
Volunteer being the key word.
Okay, well, come on over. Maybe we can have dinner and you can climb up and do the gutter while I'm cooking.
Deal.
Which I don't do, so this will never happen. Anyway, there are other things we wanted to talk about. I just want to say one thing about neighborhoods. I grew up in a town where, we grew up in a neighborhood. I also want to say that Mr. Rogers was born in my hometown. Wow. And so neighborhoods were kind of like things that, I don't know, maybe we just, felt about neighborhoods because that became his big thing. I really feel like if you have a safe neighborhood and you know your neighbors, you're going to be stronger in so many ways. And I'm trying to develop that where I am now. And lucky for me, I've found neighbors, I found neighbors who feel the same way. And we've kind of said to each other, we're going to try to be there for you. We're going to try to be there for each other. And it's really simple if you just look at it that way.
And it's powerful. It makes me think both about social isolation and loneliness, how just a nice hello, it could be from mailbox to mailbox. That might be the only social connection that person's had that day or that several days. And that can be huge. The other thing it makes me think about
what
is, gosh forbid, there's an emergency, a large scale emergency or disaster. That's when these neighbor to neighbor informal networks and people checking in on people is going to make potentially a life or death difference.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Heck, we've got a heat wave coming up, right?
Right.
So if you know about maybe a person, an older person living a couple doors down who may or may not have adequate cooling, maybe it's a good time to check in.
That's a really good idea, but it's hard to do.
Why?
Should I go and check in on that person? That's why it's important to start the relationships before it's too late. You're right. Waving when you drive by, saying hi at the mailbox, that's an entree. Mm-hmm. So then you're not just saying, oh, geez, I probably shouldn't go. They don't want to be maybe they're okay. Maybe this is too intrusive. You know how the person feels about these kinds of things, and it'll be okay.
Yes, you're right. I think, in fact, when you have that mailbox-to-mailbox conversation, it's maybe not a bad idea to just say, hey, could I also maybe get your phone number?
Yeah.
That way if you notice something funny going on at the house and you can call.
We shouldn't be ashamed to have those conversations. We're afraid to have them. We talked about that in our last episode, frank conversations. Let's just say to our neighbors, hey, I'll be there for you. How about it? How do you feel about that? Right. It's taking a step forward. But if you can do that and you see that the other person agrees, boy, you feel so much more secure.
Yes, exactly.
I see why you want to talk about villages a lot, because it really is important and it really does work.
It's important for all of us too. And I would encourage anybody who's listening to think about, supporting a village now, even if they're under the age of 65 or whatever it might be, that this is something we prioritize for our community.
Absolutely. Right. We wanted to talk a little bit about programs too. We were talking about success stories in terms of age and dementia friendly communities and so on. We started with, policy and the villages. How about, we talked about memory cafes, and are there other programs that we want to talk about?
Well, those are certainly two really important ones, memory cafes. There's also a lot of intergenerational programming. In fact, we're sitting here at Greenfield Community College, and Judy Raper, who I know you know well, is doing some fantastic intergenerational programming. And there's a number of other groups. It's interesting, speaking about social isolation and loneliness, those are the two groups that tend to have the highest rates of feelings of loneliness is younger adults and then older people. So intergenerational programming that can span those gaps by forming meaningful connections is always fantastic. I think the burden is on us in the human services world to be able to reach out and make collaborations that work between organizations that serve older adults and those that serve youth. So that's something we're working on all the time. I'd love to see more of it. I've done some work with a group called The Perfect Pair, which is
I never heard of that.
Yeah, they it basically fosters connections between older adults and college students. We don't have one locally just yet, but they are based in big universities all across the country, so that's really exciting.
Well, we have a lot of universities and colleges around here, so I think you have some more work to do, Jason.
Yeah, indeed.
The intergenerational thing is really interesting. Alex, who is our producer, he's not the same age as I am. There are a few decades between us. We've had some really wonderful conversations. I'm a dancer. I have a big dance group. We had a dance last night, and most of us were older adults, but there were 4 or 5 people who were much younger than us. And at first it felt a little funny, but we were all doing this dance together, and it was wonderful, and nobody felt that it was odd. And we had conversations. Well, why are you doing this? Why are you here? I mean, it was just really wonderful. So once again, it's like, is it okay to knock on my neighbor's door? Is it okay to start a conversation with somebody or see if they want to join your group, even if they are a bit younger than you?
Yeah. And, we talked last episode about ageism. And I should note that ageism is not limited to discrimination towards older adults. It's also about excluding younger people and devaluing them. Yep. So that's another kind of commonality to consider, is whether your voice is being discounted simply because of how old or how young you are. Right?
Okay, so you wanted to say some more things about ageism that we weren't able to talk about the last time you were here. The notion of decline. We always think that, people are getting older and they are declining in their abilities and so on. You wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, physical and cognitive decline are a thing. They are often symptoms of illness or a medical condition that goes outside what we might call normal aging. But I think to paint aging as a phase of decline is to do it a huge disservice to all the growth that can happen during that period. As you may have more time available perhaps in your life to pursue interests, beyond what you have. We talk a lot about, there's different kinds of intelligence, right? Like,
sure,
there's wisdom. There's what they call crystallized intelligence. The sharpest 25-year-old in the world is not going to have the judgment or the wisdom or the so-called crystallized intelligence as somebody who's older. Right?
Wait. Crystallized intelligence. Tell us what that is.
It's a technical term.
I like it.
I think my understanding is that it's the ability to synthesize the information and perspectives that's grown up, increased over a lifetime into what we might call wisdom, judgment, experience.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like what you had told me about self-ageism and how it does us a disservice. Yeah.
Well, so it's sort of as it sounds, I think that when we, whatever it might be, ageism or anything else, when we apply these negative patterns of thought to ourselves based upon this number on our birth certificate, and by the way, with folks who are older, biological age starts to matter a lot less than kind of physiological age. So, sad to say, but you'll sometimes see people who are maybe in their 50s or quite younger, who almost appear to be aging and are aging in some ways much more than folks who have a longer lifespan. That's not necessarily anybody's fault. It just happens.
Right.
So, but sort of to apply a negative self-image across the board based upon your age.
Where you see that, we talked about this a long time ago. We see that in greeting cards. We're depicted as people who can't get out of a chair, even though sometimes, let's face it, you can't get out of the chair as well as you did before. I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it, but when people say, my father used to say, something like the golden years are not that shiny or something like that. And in ways they're not. But I also feel like they can be really productive. I think what we're doing right now is evidence of that.
Right. I agree. And that's an interesting perspective. I think that we were talking about this a little bit before we went on live on the mic here, but any age can be life is hard, life is so hard. And each phase of life, I'm a 48-year-old man, and sometimes things are really challenging. And I don't think, though, that it would be fair to myself to sort of, as I age, to say, well, things are so much harder now. I don't know the future. Maybe they will be, but maybe it won't be just because I'm 70. It'll be, because of circumstances, and that there's always a way to reframe how you feel about yourself. And it's sort of, I think when we put it on, or when older people put it on themselves that aging is hard, I'm miserable, I don't have a use, you're at risk of sort of tamping down your ability to have a full life, to advocate for yourself.
Yeah, but Jason, how do you, when you wake up in the morning and, you're just having that morning where you're like, what's this all about? Is anybody listening? Does anybody hear me? Why should I get up? I mean, I'm not saying that this is me, but I know, let's be honest. We have conversations with friends and we feel this way sometimes. It's hard to say, well, in the time that I have left, what can I do that matters?
Yeah, great question.
I mean, it is real.
Yeah. That's a very.
I know you don't have answers.
Right.
I'm just saying, I don't want us to think that we should not say things like, Mother, don't listen because I'm going to say a word you'd never let me say. Oh, getting old sucks. I can't believe I can actually say that word because I would never have been allowed to say it before, but now it's like common. It's true that sometimes it really does. And I think by pretending that it doesn't, we are also doing ourselves a disservice.
You're absolutely right. I guess my point would be that sometimes any phase of life can suck.
That's what we have to remember.
Right, a lot.
Right.
And it's not necessary to say that my life is now hard just because I'm aging. I hope that's not the case, right? And I worry that, when that if that becomes a mantra for somebody, it sort of invites them to devalue themselves strictly because of their age. And I think that that's a mistake.
I think while we're talking about this, I'm thinking about, what was it, the Ohio State University, their aging center came up with that really great tagline that I think can lift us all up. It said something like, aging, so cool that everybody's doing it.
Right.
I mean, I think it's something that was more than just a clever line. It's something that is true and that we should think about it. Mm-hmm. We're all aging. That's why I liked the idea of having folks who are not in the older adult category right now, or in that population right now, start thinking about what it's going to be like for them, or thinking about what it is like for their parents or grandparents from their point of view as an aging person, which leads us back to sort of advocacy and things that we can do. Mm-hmm. Do you mind if I read something that you said again? I love this, and I know you wanted to talk about it, but I know we're starting to run out of time like we always do when we talk. But I love this, and I'm going to read it, okay?
Sure.
So Jason, I wrote this down because we talked about this. He said, self-ageism does older folks a big disservice. We hear it all the time in phrases like getting old sucks. But does it? Or is it that you aren't getting the care that addresses your needs or the accommodations for how your body has changed? And Jason said, I worry that when people refuse to identify as older, they feel a shame that suppresses their desire to advocate for change. For example, using the age and dementia-friendly movement. I want you to talk about that a minute. What did that mean? Advocate for change using that movement.
Right. So the age and dementia-friendly framework, and in our case, we have this regional action plan that's specific for the Franklin County North Quabbin region. If you are looking for ways to get involved, to get suggestions about what could be done, for example, maybe promoting a senior tax work-off program in your town, or joining a village, or there's that. In this case, that plan basically just gives you a jumping off point to get involved.
Okay.
So that's what that framework is. I don't want to get us too distracted on that, but that's what it is a path.
What we should say right now is, if people do want to find out more about that, how can they reach you or the person that would help them find that?
Sure. Well, anybody is welcome to email me, jmolony @lifepathma.org. Or they can call the LifePath main number and be connected to me. So I'm always available to folks in that way. There's also a newsletter that one can find and sign up for from the LifePath website, or read more information there. The regional action plan that I'm referring to is available on our webpage as well. Okay, we got that in, and I'm glad we did. So, we can do things, you and I, at where we are in our communities. And LifePath, and we are going to talk about LifePath again, they had a grant program this year that actually helped folks who were thinking about what we can do to make our communities better for older adults and others also. And so LifePath had some grants. You want to talk about that? Yeah, sure. In terms of how the folks thought about that. Look, we need this. Let's apply for a grant, and maybe they got it. And how is that going to help folks? Yeah, exactly. So again, like Denise was referring to, we had a community grant program where we gave, it turned out to be 13 awards, a total of $37,500 distributed to, I think it was 11 organizations. And this is an annual small grant program. So it's right now June of 2025. Later this late fall, folks should be looking to LifePath and to the Age and Dementia Friendly Movement for information about how to apply for this year, and then the following year for these small grants. Basically, what we did is invited the communities to submit proposals for how they could make their area more age and dementia friendly, referencing this action plan that I mentioned. And we got tons of, I think we had something like 50 proposals, of which we were able to fund about, I don't know what the fraction is, but a reasonable number of.
What were some of the grants that were funded? Are we allowed to say at this point? Has it been made public?
Sure. Yeah, we can. Well, for example, we funded memory cafes up in Northfield and in Bernardston. We funded a dementia-friendly bench that goes really beyond a bench for the Leverett Library. Yeah, and actually dementia-friendly and age-friendly signage for the Mount Grace Land Trust to use on a path.
Oh, the signage for the path. That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
What about the one in Conway for transportation? Because, we live in a rural area and transportation is so difficult for folks who are older.
Yeah, I believe they called it the Senior Uber program. Yeah. And again, these are modest grants, so $3,000 is not going to radically transform the transportation landscape in Conway, but it provided the Conway Mass in Motion and Age Friendly Committee there with the tools to get it off the ground. I believe it was organizing drivers, vetting them, providing some coordination. Then we also were able to fund Conway to start a program to build a database for service providers for home maintenance and things like that. So,
and what was important about that, I know we talked about it, was that those people who would provide the home services and also those who would provide transportation, and it was transportation. What I really liked about that grant, it wasn't just transportation for to go to medical appointments, which, those services are out there through a lot of councils on aging and so on. But this was also, at nighttime, older adults don't want to drive, but they still want to go out, maybe go to a movie, see a play, go to listen to some musicians nearby, but they don't want to drive.
Right.
But this would provide transportation to those kinds of things, too, to enhance their social lives, which I thought was just really wonderful. And because these folks were vetted and they were people from the town, so there was a trust issue already involved. I thought that was really a good thing.
Yeah, I heard from Valley Neighbors down a little bit further in South County. This is one of these village organizations.
Right.
Oh, I believe it was just in the last year. They did something like over 8,000 miles of volunteer transportation.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
But you're right. The villages and these sort of work in sometimes they call it microtransit. They are doing things that we at LifePath cannot do, especially in this challenging funding environment. A lot of organizations are having to focus just on like medical transportation, let's say. So to be able to build upon that is, and provide transportation for whatever.
Yeah, folks who don't live in a rural area probably don't understand how important it is to have transportation. We don't have public transportation enough here. It's really impossible to get public transportation into some of our hill towns and so on.
Yeah.
So this kind of program is really important.
Yeah.
So before we run out of time, I wanted you to take a look at your notes and see if there was anything else that you wanted to talk about before I did a little ending.
Well, let's see. I mean, I did want to mention, we've heard this number kind of bandied around through this conversation and throughout our lives, 65.
Yeah.
And so I would just caution, anybody to think kind of creatively and question the assumptions that are baked into that number. I looked it up, and the person who developed the number of the age of 65 as the age in which social welfare programs in their country would come online was Otto von Bismarck. He did it in 1889. So
oh my gosh.
Right? Because
nobody lived to be 65
precisely,
probably then.
Yeah, and then FDR doubled down using the same number. And yeah, so those are antiquated numbers in some ways, but we still use them as a benchmark. And I'm not saying we need to throw out the age 65, but just keep in mind that it's often paints way too wide of a brush, spanning 40 years and 3 generations. We would never talk about age policy as applying to everyone, or youth policy as applying to everyone under 30.
Right.
So yeah, just to keep that in mind. And you mentioned early on about how, this kind of fastest growing subset are the oldest, if you will, people over the age of 85, who have very different needs from somebody who's just crossing over into 66 now. So,
but I have a friend who is more than 85 and he just submitted a manuscript for publication.
That's fantastic.
And it's a book that he's been working on for several years, and it's a heavy duty book. And there are a lot of examples of, I can't think of any of the names right now, of course, of authors, of artists and other creative people in general who did their best work after 70.
Yeah.
You can Google that for our next episode.
I believe you. I was at the Mother's Day half marathon. My wife is a marathon runner, and they call out the age of people crossing the finish line. And I heard over and over 72, 71, 68, 75. You'd be surprised.
Okay, so I'm just going to say it. My husband is in the older adult category, and he plays hockey. He's a goaltender. And he was just in the, it was part of the, oh God, I don't know all the hockey terms, so don't be listening to that part.
You can make them up.
I'll make them up. He was in the Mass Senior Games, the unofficial part for people over 70. And there was somebody in there who was 84.
Playing ice hockey.
And he plays twice a week. He's not 84. But he plays twice a week. So, we really do have to rethink it. And hearing stories like that, it's not just me saying, yay, yay, John, that's my husband. Hearing stories like that, I think, helps us. Mm-hmm. I mean, we did a story about Gabe, who was playing pickleball. And he was in his early 80s. And he made friends who were much younger than him. And he found that this was a new thing for him to do. And he is thriving because he picked up that pickleball paddle. So I love this idea of rethinking 65. Okay, any famous last words before I end with more of your words that you gave to me a little earlier?
No, I would just, once again, encourage people to get involved, to be present in part of conversations that are affecting older people should include older people's voices, asking if whatever it is that's being proposed is, sometimes we talk about the A's, affordable for older adults, accessible for them, appropriate. Right?
Oh.
Asking those questions and thinking about it, and that's how we're going to move this age and dementia-friendly work forward.
I'll remember that, and I will do that, but I honestly think we're kind of doing it on our own right now. So this is something that Jason said, and I just, it sounded like a good way to end this conversation because these are really good words in my mind. He said, I'm looking at the folks who were strident advocates in the movements of the 1960s, 70s, and beyond. I urge you to look around you. See if you think you live in a society that hears you, includes you, and reflects you as you are. You don't have to feel ashamed because you don't look or move or earn like you used to. You're an essential part of the community. And everyone, those who are older now and those who will be, everyone needs your activism, your contribution, and your voice.
Couldn't agree with myself more.
I love that. I think we can be active, and I think we're doing it now. And I think when we go back to our communities, I know you're going to do it. I know I do talk about some of the pleasures of being an older adult. So let's use our voices.
Okay. Oh, well, cheers to that, Denise. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you later.
Okay.
You're going to do the gutters, right?
I'll get to it one of these days.
He's going to do it. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
This concludes today's podcast. We're always looking for new ideas, so feel free to reach out to Judy Raper, Associate Dean of Community Engagement at Greenfield Community College at 413-775-1819. If you have an idea you'd love to share. Special thanks to the creators of Backyard Oasis, Denise Schwartz, Chad Fuller, Dennis Lee, and Christine Copeland. Have a great day.